The silver spoon slipped from Evelyn Hart's hand, clattering sharply against the dinner plate. Candlelight flickered across her tense face. After her husband's funeral, this dinner was meant to bring her and her daughter back together, but instead it became the final fracture. "I sold Cliff Crest Lodge," Mom Maddie said casually, her tone almost cheerful. "And Dad's old truck, too. Oliver says keeping old things doesn't make sense. We need the money for our trip to Europe. I transferred you 30% of the sale. I think that's fair." The word fair sliced through Evelyn like a blade. 30% the value her only child placed on 45 years of love and sacrifice. The seaside lodge where Daniel had built wooden chairs with his own hands, where Maddie had run barefoot across the sand as a child, had been reduced to a transaction. Evelyn said nothing. Oliver, sitting beside his wife, smirked. "You should be happy for us, Mother. This trip is a new beginning. Don't worry, you'll be fine." Fine. The word landed like mockery. Evelyn felt her throat tighten, her heart pounding beneath the weight of betrayal, but her expression remained calm. In her mind, she saw Daniel's gentle smile, the way he used to hand her a cup of tea on cold evenings. Now all that warmth was gone. "You did all this without even telling me," Evelyn finally asked quietly. Maddie avoided her gaze. "I didn't want to stress you out. You live alone now. You don't need the lodge." The words struck harder than any argument. Cliffcrest wasn't just a property. It was where Daniel still lived in memory, where laughter had once filled the air. Evelyn lowered her eyes, took a slow breath, and said softly, "I wish you luck." Maddie exhaled in relief, thinking the matter was closed. Oliver placed his arm around her shoulders, wearing a smug grin. "Then it's settled. You rest, Mother. We have packing to do." He leaned in to kiss her cheek, his touch cold as marble. When the door closed, silence swallowed the room. Evelyn stood staring at Daniel's empty chair at the faded wedding photo on the wall. In that picture, they were both smiling brightly, alive with hope. Now she stood alone in the dim light. "Do you see this, Daniel?" she whispered. "She sold the memories we built together." Outside, the ocean wind howled against the cliffs. Evelyn's mind turned to the envelope Daniel had given her before he died. "Open it when you're ready," he had said. She had assumed it contained ordinary paperwork, but tonight, after such betrayal, it felt like the last thread connecting her to him. She walked into the bedroom, opened the vanity drawer, and found the worn yellow envelope resting where she had left it. Her hands trembled as she broke the seal and unfolded the letter inside. Daniel's familiar handwriting filled the page. "Evelyn, if you are reading this, it means I'm gone. I'm sorry for keeping this secret, but I wanted you to live without worry. Over the years, I have invested and transferred all our assets into North Star Holdings. You are the sole heir." Beneath the letter were documents, certificates of ownership, property maps, and a portfolio listing various holdings: the Seaside Lodge stakes in a transport company, and the North Key building, the very place where Maddie and Oliver now lived. Evelyn stared at the papers, speechless. Daniel, the quiet, hard-working man she had loved, the one she thought had left little behind, had in fact built a quiet empire. He had once told her, "I just want you to live without fear." Now she understood. He had prepared not only for his death, but for the day she might face betrayal. Closing the letter, Evelyn looked into the mirror. Her face was marked with age, but her eyes burned with fierce clarity. The woman her daughter had dismissed as weak now held the truth that could change everything: wealth, power, and the will to use both. Her reflection spoke back with a voice calm but sharp as glass. "My dear, you've sold my past," she said quietly, "but your future now belongs to me." Outside, rain began to fall, the sea wind howling against the Halifax cliffs. Each drop struck the windows like a drumbeat, a warning of the storm that was coming. Evelyn closed her eyes, drawing a deep breath. The woman who had been forgotten, belittled, and left behind was gone. In her place stood someone new, someone ready to decide how this story would end. The next morning, Halifax lay beneath a thin veil of fog. Evelyn Hart woke after a night of restless sleep. Pale light streamed across the table, where the yellow envelope still rested the words of Daniel, echoing in her mind. "You are the sole heir." That sentence felt both like a comfort and a burden, a truth she had not yet grasped in full. Evelyn brewed a pot of tea and sat silently by the window. Daniel had lived simply all his life, just a delivery driver. How could he possibly have owned a company called North Star Holdings and left behind such an enormous fortune? She turned over the last page of the letter where Daniel had written, "Contact Graham Langford, my trusted attorney. He will help you when the time comes." Beneath his signature was a phone number and an address. Evelyn remembered the man faintly, a tall visitor who had once come to the house years ago to speak privately with Daniel in the garden and then disappeared without a word. Perhaps this was him. By noon, the sky had turned gray, and a cold rain began to fall. Evelyn wrapped herself in her trench coat, opened her umbrella, and made her way to the bus stop. The city glistened in the drizzle reflections of headlights shimmering on the wet pavement. As the bus rolled through familiar streets, she watched the cafes and shop fronts she had passed for years, realizing how much the world had changed while she had stood still. When the bus stopped in front of a tall glass building, she looked up at the sign Langford and Associates. Inside, the air smelled faintly of polished wood and coffee. "Do you have an appointment?" the young receptionist asked politely. Evelyn hesitated. "My name is Evelyn Hart. Mr. Graham Langford knows me." Moments later, a tall, silver-haired man stepped out from an office. His eyes softened when they met hers. "Mrs. Hart Daniels spoke of you often. I've been waiting for this day." In the quiet meeting room, he poured her tea before opening a thick file. "Daniel was very careful," Graham said. 10 years ago, he asked me to establish North Star Holdings to manage a series of confidential investments. He instructed that I meet you only after his passing." Evelyn's hands tightened around her cup. So the letter was real. "More than real," Graham said, sliding the documents toward her. Daniel started small, saving from his salary, investing in old shipping stocks, and gradually building. He bought guest houses, invested in property, and took shares in several transport companies. North Star now owns 7 properties, an 18-story apartment complex, and shares in 3 maritime firms. Evelyn felt the air leave her chest. Her husband, the modest man who carried lunch in a tin box and worked long hours without complaint, had built an empire in silence. "He kept this from me because he was afraid I'd worry," she asked. Graham nodded, and because he feared Maddie would change if she knew. He once told me he wanted his daughter to love her parents, not their money. Evelyn said nothing. Every word confirmed what Daniel had foreseen. Maddie had already sold Cliffcrest Lodge, the home of their memories, for a fleeting taste of luxury. "Would you like to challenge the sale?" "The transaction was illegal," Graham offered. Evelyn shook her head slowly. "No, I won't take my daughter to court. I'll reclaim everything in another way, one she'll never forget." Graham studied her carefully. "Then I'll help you recover the assets discreetly. But it will take time and absolute secrecy. Time." Evelyn replied, her voice steady, "Is the one thing I still have." When she left the office, the wind stung her cheeks, but her steps felt lighter. She stopped by a small cafe near the harbor, the same one where Daniel used to sit every Sunday morning with his newspaper. She ordered an espresso, opened her notebook, and wrote the first line, "Mother's plan begins today." She would no longer let her daughter or that smug husband control her life. If Maddie believed her mother was just a frail widow, she was about to learn that her mother's silence was not weakness, but the calm before a storm. Evelyn gazed through the mist toward the sea. Waves crashed against the cliffs, white and wild like torn fragments of memory. To the world, she was just an old woman sitting alone, but inside her heart burned with fire. She would reclaim Cliffcrest Lodge, restore Daniel's name, and teach her daughter that some things were never for sale: love, loyalty, and respect. Outside, the rain kept falling, tapping steadily on the cafe window. Yet to Evelyn, it no longer felt like sorrow. It was a cleansing rain, washing away fragility and fear, clearing a path for rebirth. Halifax would soon witness the return of the woman once dismissed as powerless Evelyn Hart, the widow who held the secret to an empire and the will to wield it. The next morning, a thin veil of fog blanketed Halifax. Evelyn Hart awoke after a night spent in near sleeplessness. Pale light spilled across the table, illuminating the yellow envelope, while Daniel's voice echoed softly in her mind. "You are the sole heir." The words felt both like comfort and burden, a truth that carried weight she did not yet fully understand. Evelyn brewed her tea and sat quietly by the window. Daniel had lived his life simply just a delivery driver with calloused hands and a modest smile. How could he have founded a company called North Star Holdings and amassed such wealth? She turned to the last page of his letter where Daniel had written, "Contact Graham Langford, my trusted attorney. He will help you when the time comes." Beneath his note was a phone number and address. Evelyn suddenly remembered a tall man who had once visited years ago, speaking privately with Daniel in the back garden before disappearing. That must have been him. By noon, cold rain began to fall. Evelyn pulled on her trench coat, took her umbrella, and made her way to the bus stop. The city shimmered under the downpour reflections of lights dancing on wet pavement. She watched familiar cafes and narrow streets glide past, feeling as though the world around her had been changing all along, and she was only now waking up to it. When the bus stopped before a tall glass building, she looked up at the sign that read, "Langford and Associates." Inside, the air smelled faintly of polished wood and coffee. "Do you have an appointment?" the young receptionist asked. Evelyn hesitated. "My name is Evelyn Hart. Mr. Graham Langford knows me." Moments later, a tall, silver-haired man stepped out of his office. His expression softened the moment he saw her. "Mrs. Hart Daniel spoke of you often. I've been waiting for this day." In a small meeting room, he poured her tea before opening a thick folder. Daniel was an extremely cautious man, Graham began. 10 years ago, he asked me to establish North Star Holdings to manage his confidential assets. He instructed that I contact you only after his passing. Evelyn's breath caught. So the letter was real. More real than you think. Graham said, sliding the documents toward her. Daniel started slowly investing small sums from his savings and old stock shares. Over the years, he bought guest houses, invested in land, and acquired stakes in several shipping companies. Today, North Star Holdings owns 7 properties, an 18-story apartment building, and shares in 3 maritime transport firms. Evelyn felt her chest tighten. Her husband, the quiet man who carried a lunchbox every morning and came home smelling of sea salt and gasoline, had built an empire without her ever knowing. "He hid it because he thought I would worry," she asked softly. Graham nodded. That, and he feared Maddie would change if she ever found out. He once told me he wanted his daughter to love her parents, not their money. Evelyn sat in silence. Every word confirmed Daniel's fears had come true. Maddie had already sold Cliffcrest Lodge, the home filled with memories, for the illusion of a glittering life. "Do you want to contest the sale?" Graham asked gently. The transaction was illegal. Evelyn shook her head. "No, I won't drag my daughter through court. I'll reclaim everything in another way, a way that will make her understand." Graham studied her quietly. "Then I'll help you recover the assets discreetly. But it will require patience and absolute secrecy." "Time," Evelyn said, her voice steady, "is the only thing I still have." When she stepped outside, the wind stung her cheeks, but her steps felt lighter than they had in years. She stopped at a small cafe by the harbor, the same place Daniel used to sit every Sunday morning with his paper. She ordered an espresso, took out a small notebook, and wrote the first line, "A mother's plan begins today." She would no longer allow her daughter or that arrogant husband to dictate her life. If Maddie believed her mother was nothing more than a frail widow, she would soon learn that her mother's silence was never weakness. It was the calm before a storm. Evelyn looked out toward the mist-covered sea. Waves crashed against the cliffs, white and wild like fragments of shattered memory. She was just an old woman sitting alone, but inside her fire burned fiercely. She would take back Cliffcrest Lodge, restore Daniel's honor, and teach her daughter that some things could never be bought or sold: love, loyalty, and respect. Outside, the rain continued to fall, but to Evelyn, it no longer felt sorrowful. It was cleansing, washing away fear and frailty, clearing the path for a new beginning. Halifax would soon witness the return of a woman once dismissed as powerless Evelyn Hart, the widow who carried the secret of an empire and the resolve to claim what was rightfully hers. Thursday afternoon in Halifax shimmered beneath golden sunlight, the ocean breeze gently stirring the curtains. Evelyn Hart sat by the window, a cup of cold tea resting in her hands. 3 days had passed since her meeting with Graham Langford, and that morning he had confirmed what still felt impossible. Every North Star Holdings document was authentic. She was not merely Daniel Hart's widow, she was the sole heir to an empire of staggering wealth. The phone rang. Maddie's voice came through, sweet but forced. "Mom, I just wanted to let you know the money from the house and the truck has gone through. Your 30% has been transferred. I hope you understand we really need the funds to start over. Oliver's been offered a great opportunity in Paris." Evelyn's chest tightened. 30%, you said yes," Maddie replied quickly. "You don't need Cliffcrest Lodge anymore. You never go there anyway, and Dad's old truck only brings back sad memories." Evelyn set the phone down, inhaling deeply. Sad memories of your father. That was what they called the happiest years of her life. She opened her laptop and checked her bank account. The modest number made her chuckle softly. 30%. They had sold Cliffcrest Lodge for less than half its market value, sold her memories for the price of a holiday. A gentle knock sounded at the door. Mrs. Rosa Ortega, her kindly neighbor, stepped in, carrying a basket of warm pastries. "Evelyn, I heard Maddie and her husband are leaving for Europe," she said. "Tomorrow morning," Evelyn replied evenly, "both of them." Rosa set the basket down and lowered her voice. "I also heard Oliver is deep in debt. The bank may be preparing to seize their apartment." Evelyn smiled faintly. "Perhaps, but they'll soon learn that Europe isn't the escape they think it is." Rosa took her friend's hand. "You can't let them treat you like this. People only change when they face the consequences of their choices." The words lingered. Evelyn knew Rosa was right. Endless forgiveness had made Maddie forget gratitude. Perhaps now her daughter needed to understand the sting of loss. The next morning, Evelyn arrived at Graham's office. "I want Cliffcrest Lodge back," she said firmly. "As soon as possible." Graham nodded. "The sale can be annulled. You were a legal co-owner, and the buyer was cooperative once we offered repayment. I'll handle everything quietly. No one will know. Thank you, Evelyn said. Discretion is all I ask. As she stood to leave, Graham hesitated. One more thing. I looked into Oliver Hale's records. He's heavily in debt and used the apartment at North Key as collateral for a bank loan. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. North Key belongs to North Star Holdings, which means he mortgaged my property. Exactly, Graham replied. If the bank audits the ownership, they'll find out soon enough. Evelyn's smile was calm, almost serene. Then let them discover it on their own. A small lesson will be far more effective than any words from a mother. That afternoon, Evelyn rented a car and drove along the winding coastal road. The cliffs opened up to reveal the familiar outline of Cliffcrest Lodge. Bathed in sunlight, the wooden porch still faced the sea. The windows still bore the faded paint Daniel had brushed years ago. A young couple was just moving out, leaving behind a few dead plants and a for sale sign propped against the fence. Evelyn stopped by the roadside and gazed at the house for a long time. The sea wind tousled her silver hair. "I'm home, Daniel," she whispered. On the drive back, her phone rang. Mrs. Hart Graham's voice said, "The cancellation is finalized. Cliffcrest Lodge is officially yours again." Evelyn smiled. "Thank you, Graham. Step 1 is complete. Now about the North Key building. What do you intend to do with it?" "Nothing," she said. "Leave it exactly as it is, but make sure they understand who truly owns it." That evening, Maddie called from the airport, her voice bright and excited. "Mom, I knew you'd understand. This is just the beginning of something new for us." Evelyn's reply was soft but edged with quiet resolve. "Yes, a new beginning. But not for you, my dear." When the call ended, she sat in silence beneath the silver glow of the moon. On the table lay her open notebook, the last line written in a steady hand beneath the lamplight. Mother's plan, step 2, reclaim everything in silence. Outside, the wind from the sea roared stronger, rattling the windows. Each crashing wave against the cliffs sounded like a promise, a vow born from pain, patience, and purpose. Evelyn Hart, the woman once stripped of everything, was no longer the grieving widow left behind. She was the one taking back what was hers, one quiet victory at a time. Saturday morning arrived cloaked in thick fog over Halifax, the cold wind slipping through the cracks of Evelyn Hart's old house. She woke early, brewed a cup of coffee, and opened the notebook resting on her table. On the final page, in slightly uneven handwriting, were the words, "Step 2, reclaim everything in silence." She read them again as if reminding herself that from now on, every move must be deliberate, measured, and quiet. The phone rang. Graham Langford's calm, reassuring voice filled the room. "Cliffcrest Lodge is officially back under your name. All legal matters settled. Now about the North Key building, what would you like me to do?" Evelyn looked out the fogged window, her tone steady. "Transfer full operational control to me, but keep it strictly confidential, especially from Maddie." "Understood," Graham replied. "It may take a few weeks to finalize. There's another matter. Oliver is being investigated by the bank for mortgaging a property that isn't his. If they uncover the truth, he and your daughter could face serious trouble." Evelyn pressed her lips together. "Do nothing. Let the truth do its work." After the call, she wrapped herself in a thick coat and stepped outside. The streets of Halifax glistened with moisture, the cafe signs dripping with dew. Passers-by greeted her with sympathetic eyes, whispering among themselves, "Poor widow Hart, abandoned by her daughter." Evelyn smiled faintly, saying nothing, allowing them to believe what they wished. She stopped at her favorite flower shop and chose a bouquet of white daisies. "For Daniel," she said softly. The florist nodded silently and wrapped the flowers with care. Evelyn carried them to the hilltop cemetery where the gray headstones gleamed under the drizzle. She knelt before Daniel's grave, placed the flowers on the damp ground, and brushed her fingers across his engraved name. "Daniel," she whispered, "everything is going as planned. Maddie doesn't know I've taken back the house or that I control North Key, but one day she will understand that love cannot be traded for money." A gust of wind swept through, scattering the petals across the grass. Evelyn stood quietly until the rain thickened her coat, clinging to her shoulders. That afternoon, Graham called again. "Mrs. Hart Oliver has withdrawn nearly all his funds and transferred them overseas. It seems he's trying to escape his debts." Evelyn exhaled slowly. "Let him go. He thinks he's clever, but he'll face his consequences soon enough." And Maddie Graham asked. "She'll follow him, believing she's starting a new life," Evelyn replied. "But in truth, she's leaving everything behind." That evening, Halifax was wrapped in calm once more. Rosa Ortega, her neighbor, arrived with a basket of freshly baked bread. "Evelyn, I heard Maddie's gone. Are you all right?" Evelyn accepted the basket with a small smile. "Better than you might think, Rosa. Really. If I were you, I'd be furious." "What good would anger do?" Evelyn said, her voice gentle but firm. "Sometimes loving a child means letting them fall so they can learn the price of standing again." Rosa sighed and shook her head. "You're stronger than anyone I know. I just hope Maddie realizes that before it's too late." When Rosa left, silence filled the house. Evelyn opened the folder Graham had sent North Star Holdings assets, a small hotel in Moncton, 3 rental apartments, and the 18-story North Key building. At the bottom of the document was one line, "Sole owner, Evelyn Hart." She ran her fingers lightly over the paper, a quiet smile curving her lips. Daniel had left her more than wealth. He had left her trust. He had known that one day she would need this strength, and that day had come. Night fell, and the golden lights of Halifax glowed through the rain-streaked windows. Evelyn sat before her old wedding photo, listening to the distant crash of waves beyond the cliffs. Beside her cooling cup of tea lay Daniel's letter. She opened it again, reading the final line he had written. "You are stronger than you think. When the world turns its back on you, remember you hold the key." Closing the letter, she whispered, "You see, Daniel, I've begun to turn the key." The next morning, a message from Graham appeared on her phone. "Cliffcrest Lodge finalized. North Key now under your control." Evelyn typed back, "Good. Prepare every document. I want everything ready when the time comes." Outside, a gentle rain fell. Evelyn stood by the window, watching her reflection in the glass. The woman staring back was no longer a fragile widow abandoned by her child, but one who held her future and her daughters in steady hands. A faint smile touched her lips, her eyes firm and unyielding. The real reckoning had not yet begun, but Evelyn knew that when Maddie returned, she would finally see the truth. The mother she once dismissed as a burden was now the one who held her fate. Morning in Halifax was shrouded in pale gray, the sea wind cutting through the damp streets with an icy chill. Evelyn Hart sat at the dining table, listening to the morning news about a financial fraud investigation unfolding in the city. She smiled faintly. The moment had come. Cliffcrest Lodge now belonged entirely to her, and Graham Langford was finalizing the transfer of the North Key building. The phone rang. Graham's calm voice came through the receiver. "Mrs. Hart, the transfer of North Key's operational control is nearly complete. Within 2 weeks, you'll have full authority over all shares." "Keep everything quiet," Graham Evelyn replied evenly. "If anyone asks, say North Star Holdings is restructuring. I don't want Maddie or Oliver to know." Graham hesitated for a moment, then spoke softly. "There's something else. Oliver and Maddie flew to Paris yesterday. He's looking for new investors, probably to cover his debts back here in Halifax. Evelyn closed her eyes and took a slow breath. He's not searching for opportunity. He's running away. But let him. The sea doesn't chase after ships that flee. After the call, she stepped out into the garden and sat on the wooden bench Daniel had built years ago. Autumn leaves drifted down, covering the path in red and gold. Evelyn no longer felt anger, only calm, the steady resolve of someone who knew she held the upper hand. Around noon, Rosa Ortega stopped by carrying a folded newspaper. "Evelyn, have you seen this? The bank is investigating a fake mortgage connected to the North Key property. They mentioned Oliver Hale by name." Evelyn feigned surprise. "Really? How strange. What would Oliver have to do with that building?" Rosa sighed. "If this scandal breaks, Maddie will suffer the most. I just hope you won't be too harsh on her." Evelyn looked out the window, her eyes distant. "I'm not angry, Rosa. Everyone must eventually pay for their choices." Later that afternoon, Graham called again. "Mrs. Hart Oliver reached out to me. He wants to meet and negotiate." "Should I agree?" Evelyn's reply was immediate. "No. Do not let him know I'm involved. Everything will collapse on its own. We don't need to push it." That night, rain began to fall steadily. Evelyn retrieved a wooden box containing Daniel's old papers. Inside, she found a faded photograph Daniel holding a young Maddie in his arms, his eyes kind and full of pride. She traced their faces gently, her voice trembling. "She's forgotten this man, Daniel. But don't worry, I'll make sure she remembers." She opened her notebook and wrote a new line beneath the others. "Step 3, wait for the collapse." 2 weeks later, just as Evelyn had predicted, Oliver was arrested in Paris for financial fraud. News of his arrest spread through Halifax faster than the wind. That night, her phone rang again. On the other end was Maddie's trembling voice, thick with desperation. "Mom!" "They arrested Oliver. They said he used fake documents and all our accounts are frozen. I have no money left. I'm staying in a cheap hotel." "Mom, I don't know what to do." Evelyn listened to her daughter's sobs, her heart stirring with a mix of sadness and quiet justice. "Calm down, Maddie. Do you really think I can help you?" Now silence filled the line for a long moment before Maddie broke down completely. "Mom, I know I hurt you. I was wrong. Please, please let me come home." Evelyn's voice softened but carried strength. "Come home then, but this time you'll have to face yourself." A week later, Maddie returned to Halifax. When she stepped out of the taxi, she was thin pale, her coat worn and her eyes hollow from sleepless nights. Evelyn opened the door, standing still as she looked at the daughter who had once turned her back on her. "Mom," Maddie whispered through tears, "I have nothing left. Oliver's in prison. I've lost everything." Evelyn stepped aside, her tone calm but firm. "Come in. Under this roof, you're still my daughter if you're truly ready to learn what that means." Maddie broke down, collapsing into her mother's arms. Evelyn held her tightly, but her eyes were not weak or sorrowful. They carried the quiet composure of a woman who had won through patience and grace. That night, after Maddie had fallen asleep, Evelyn stepped out onto the balcony overlooking the dark sea. The waves crashed fiercely against the cliffs, salt and wind swirling in the air. She whispered, "Daniel, she's home. But this time she'll learn what you wanted her to understand, that love and respect cannot be bought." In the distance, lightning flashed across the horizon, illuminating the churning water. A storm was coming. Evelyn closed her eyes and breathed deeply. She knew this storm was not from the sky, but from within human hearts. And she, the woman once dismissed and left behind, was ready to face it all with calm courage and the unwavering strength Daniel had always seen in her. Halifax was draped in a gray morning mist, light rain tapping softly on the wooden roof. In the small kitchen, Evelyn Hart poured tea. the steam clouding her thin spectacles. In the living room, Maddie sat silently on the couch, her face pale and her eyes swollen from crying. She had been home for 3 days, but she was no longer the proud woman who had once left Halifax smiling in triumph. Now she was hollow, weighed down by regret. "Mom," she whispered, her voice trembling, "I'm sorry for coming back without warning. I didn't know where else to go." Evelyn turned to her, her voice calm and steady. "This is still your home, but if you stay here, you must learn to live differently." Maddie lowered her head, her hands clasped tightly together. "I know. I've lost everything. Oliver's in prison and I have nothing." Evelyn sat across from her and placed a warm cup of tea on the table. "No one truly loses everything, Maddie. If you're alive, you still have a chance to begin again." For a long moment, only the sound of rain filled the silence. Maddie looked up, her red-rimmed eyes searching her mother's face. "You're not angry with me." "After all I did," Evelyn studied her quietly. "Of course I'm angry, but anger won't help you grow. What I want is for you to understand that once trust is gone, no amount of money can buy it back." Maddie's voice broke. "I thought I was choosing happiness, but I destroyed everything. I thought Oliver loved me." Evelyn exhaled softly. "You weren't deceived, Maddie. You deceived yourself. You wanted to believe that money and status could fix life, but now you've seen where that path leads." Maddie wiped her tears. "I don't even know how to start over." "You start with honesty." Evelyn said gently, "Be honest with me and with yourself." As evening fell, a knock came at the door. Graham Langford stepped in, rain glistening on his coat. "Forgive me for coming unannounced," he said, setting a folder on the table. "There's something important. The French court has officially charged Oliver Hale with financial fraud. He'll serve at least 6 months." Maddie went pale, her lips trembling. Evelyn placed a hand on her shoulder. "You'll have to face this, Maddie. Running away is no longer an option." Graham opened the folder again, and another matter, the transfer of ownership for North Key, is finalized. "As of today, Mrs. Hart, you are the legal owner." Evelyn nodded. "Thank you, Graham. Keep it confidential." Maddie's head jerked up in shock. "Mom, what did you just say? North Key belongs to you?" "Yes," Evelyn replied calmly. "Cliffcrest Lodge. North Key and North Star Holdings all belong to me. They were left by your father. I stayed silent because I didn't want greed to blind anyone." Maddie's voice quivered. "Then when I sold the lodge, You sold what was already yours," Evelyn said firmly, "and you did it without asking me once." Maddie broke down, tears spilling over. "I thought you were struggling. I just wanted to help. I was foolish." "No, you were selfish," Evelyn said quietly but clearly. "You wanted the easy path to avoid responsibility, but life doesn't forgive those who take shortcuts." Maddie covered her face, sobbing. "I've disappointed you. I don't deserve forgiveness." Evelyn stood slowly, her tone unwavering. "Forgiveness isn't a gift. It's a chance. I've already given you that chance. Now you must prove you deserve it." Graham rose quietly. "I'll leave you two to talk. Have a peaceful evening, Mrs. Hart." When he left, only the sound of the rain remained. Maddie looked up through her tears. "Did Dad know about all this? About me?" Evelyn nodded. "He knew. He believed you would change. That's why he left everything in my care to protect you, even from yourself." Maddie burst into tears, falling into her mother's arms. Evelyn held her close, her hand trembling, her eyes bright with resolve. "Cry if you must," she said softly, "but tomorrow you stand up again. Not for me, for yourself." The sea wind drifted through the window, carrying the scent of salt. Mother and daughter sat in silence, 2 women bound by pride, love, and pain. Evelyn looked toward the fading light and said quietly, From now on, you'll live with honesty, humility, and gratitude. That's what your father wanted." Maddie nodded through tears. "I promise, Mom." Outside, the rain eased. Droplets clung to the window pane, reflecting the soft glow of Halifax's lights like scattered stars over the bay. Evelyn smiled faintly. The storm had passed, and though forgiveness would take time, the journey toward redemption for both mother and daughter had finally begun. Sunday morning in Halifax dawned bright after days of rain. Soft sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, glinting on the table where Evelyn Hart was making coffee. The rich aroma filled the small house. Maddie stepped out from the living room wearing a simple knit sweater, her hair still messy, but her eyes no longer empty. "Let me help, Mom," she said softly. Evelyn smiled, pointing to the plate of eggs. "Set the table." It's been a long time since we had breakfast together. They ate in silence for a few minutes. Outside, the ocean breeze drifted gently through the air. Maddie stared at her teacup before asking quietly, "Mom, what am I supposed to do now? I have nothing left." Evelyn looked at her, her voice calm and warm. "You haven't lost everything, Maddie. You're simply standing again at the place you once walked away from. Start over with your own hands." "I've applied to a few places," Maddie said hesitantly. "If no one hires me, I'll take a job at the cafe near the harbor. I want to live on my own. Work anywhere you want." Evelyn replied, her tone firm but kind. "Just don't run away anymore. Remember, self-respect is your real wealth." Maddie's eyes welled with tears. "You're still kind to me even after all the pain I caused you." "I don't understand." Evelyn smiled gently. "Because forgiveness isn't for others, Maddie. It's for yourself. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. You must learn from what you did." Around noon, the phone rang. Graham Langford's familiar voice came through. "Mrs. Hart, the transfer for North Key is complete. You're now the sole owner." "Thank you, Graham," Evelyn said. "Keep it quiet. It's not time for anyone else to know." Hanging up, she turned to Maddie. "North Key is back in my hands. But what matters most isn't the property. It's that you understand the value of honest work." Maddie stared, astonished. "North Key belongs to you. It belonged to your father, and now to me." Evelyn said calmly, "He spent his life building it, hoping you'd one day realize that wealth is a responsibility, not a reward." Maddie's voice trembled. "I betrayed all of it. I sold the lodge. I abandoned you." Evelyn placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder, her tone gentle but firm. "Now you understand. The price you paid wasn't money. It was a lesson." That afternoon, they walked together along the shore. The salty wind tossed Maddie's hair as she bent to pick up a seashell, smiling faintly. "Mom, do you remember when I was 10, Dad used to bring me here to find shells? He said each one was a wish." "I remember," Evelyn said softly. "Your father believed the sea kept good things for those who knew how to listen." Maddie gazed out toward the horizon. "All I wish for now is the chance to start again, not to make up for my mistakes, but to live by what you and Dad taught me." Evelyn's smile was warm and deep. That's what he wanted most. Don't drown in regret, Maddie. Just act differently. When the sun began to set, they returned home. The golden light spilled across the water, reflecting through the windows. Maddie sat at the table, opened an old notebook, and wrote Day 1 starting over. Evelyn noticed, smiled, and stepped out to the balcony. The breeze carried the scent of salt and sea. She thought of Daniel, the man who had always believed their daughter would find her way home if she was brave enough. Now he had been right. Night fell. Maddie sat quietly mending her father's old scarf, each stitch a quiet act of redemption. Evelyn watched, her voice low but kind. "Tomorrow you'll come with me to see Graham. You need to learn how to manage North Key, not to grow rich, but to understand responsibility. Maddie looked up, her eyes steady. Do you really think I can do it, Mom? If I didn't believe in you, Evelyn said softly, your father wouldn't rest in peace. Their eyes met, filled with emotion. Outside, the moon rose into a clear sky, waves crashing gently against the shore, the air heavy with salt and the warmth of hope. Later, when Maddie had fallen asleep, Evelyn opened Daniel's old envelope once more. His final words were still clear. Forgiveness is the victory of a strong heart. She folded the letter and whispered, I've done it, Daniel. In the quiet house, Evelyn realized that true victory was never measured by the wealth she reclaimed, but by seeing her daughter learn to live with honesty, humility, and gratitude. The storm within them had finally passed, leaving room for a new dawn, one where two women began again, cleansed by love, trust, and the courage to forgive. Monday morning in Halifax was cloaked in a thin layer of mist. The distant sound of a ship's horn echoed through the air, blending with the salty scent of the sea. Evelyn Hart and Maddie stepped out of their small house, heading together to Graham Langford's office. Today would be the first time Maddie officially attended a meeting related to North Key, the building she had once dismissed as nothing more than an investment. On the way there, Maddie walked in silence, gripping her bag tightly. Evelyn glanced at her daughter, sensing the anxiety behind her quiet demeanor. Don't be afraid, she said softly. No one's judging you today. All you have to do is listen. But Mom Maddie whispered, I don't know anything about finance or business. I've already ruined enough. Evelyn's tone was calm and firm. No one is born knowing everything. What matters is the willingness to learn after you've fallen. Graham's office overlooked the bay, filled with natural light from wide glass windows. He greeted them warmly. Mrs. Hart, Miss Maddie, I'm so glad you both came. Daniel always said that one day North Key would belong to those who truly valued it. Maddie lowered her gaze, her voice barely audible. I didn't value anything before. Graham smiled kindly. The fact that you realize that now means you're already on the right path. He opened a folder and began presenting the structure of the holding's financial statements and renovation plans. Maddie listened attentively, taking careful notes. For the first time, she understood that these figures weren't just numbers. They represented the hard work and perseverance of her parents, the years they spent working quietly, owing nothing to anyone, expecting nothing in return. When the meeting ended, Graham handed Maddie a folder. Take your time to read this. From now on, you'll assist Mrs. Hart in making decisions for North Key. She wants you to start learning how to manage it. Maddie turned to her mother, stunned. You trust me that much? Evelyn nodded, her eyes unwavering. Of course. I don't need you to be perfect, Maddie. I just need you to be responsible. On the way home, Maddie clutched the folder tightly to her chest. It felt as though every page inside carried not guilt, but a chance for redemption. That afternoon, they stopped at a small cafe by the sea. The ocean breeze swept across the patio, brushing through Maddie's hair. Mom, she said quietly, I never thought I'd sit here with you again like this. Life always offers second chances, Evelyn said softly. It's just that not everyone is brave enough to take them. Maddie gave a faint, wistful smile. I made you suffer so much. You should have left me behind. Evelyn reached across the table, placing her hand over her daughter's. I could give up many things, Maddie, but never you. You're still part of Daniel. Tears welled in Maddie's eyes. I'll try to be worthy of that. That evening, Evelyn received an email from Graham. Oliver Hale had been officially sentenced to detention in France, awaiting extradition to Canada for further investigation into financial fraud. She closed her laptop quietly. The past was finally closing its chapter. When she walked into the living room, Maddie was sewing an old pillow. "Mom, I've read through the documents," she said. "I don't understand everything yet, but I want to learn." "You will," Evelyn replied. "It's like stitching that pillow. Small, patient steps make things whole again." Maddie looked up with a trembling smile. "I'm just afraid I'll make mistakes again." People who have fallen and still choose to try again are the strongest kind, Evelyn said gently. "You've already faced the hardest part." As night settled over Halifax, the two women sat on the porch. The sea stretched quietly before them, reflecting the moon like a strand of silver thread. Maddie leaned closer, her voice a whisper. "Mom, if Dad were still alive, do you think he'd forgive me?" Evelyn looked up at the sky. "Your father never hated you. He was only sad that you forgot where you came from. But now that you've found your way back, that's enough." Maddie rested her head on her mother's shoulder, eyes closing. "I'll live differently now, Mom. Not for money, not for anyone else, just for myself." Evelyn squeezed her daughter's hand and nodded. "Then Daniel can rest peacefully." The breeze carried the scent of salt and the rhythm of the waves against the rocks. In that quiet moment, two women sat side by side, one who had lost everything and one learning to begin again. And beneath the soft night sky of Halifax, Evelyn knew the truth saving her daughter had never been a distant dream. It was happening slowly but surely in the gentle light of newfound faith. Morning light filled Halifax with clarity and calm. Sunlight streamed through the wide glass windows of the North Quay office, casting a warm glow across Evelyn Hart's composed face. In front of her lay the renovation plans for the building, and beside her, Maddie took careful notes, her hands still trembling slightly. They were no longer the estranged mother and daughter of the past, but two women rebuilding what had once been lost. "Look here," Evelyn said, pointing to the blueprint. "Floors 12 and 14 must be repaired before winter, or the heating system will fail." Maddie nodded quickly. "I think we should hire a local contractor. It'll save money and give people jobs." Evelyn smiled softly. "A good idea. Daniel used to say that investing in people is the most lasting investment of all." That smile warmed Maddie's heart. She had feared her mother would never trust her again, yet Evelyn had not only forgiven her, but was giving her the chance to start anew. The office door opened and Graham Langford entered holding a thick folder. "Good morning, Mrs. Hart, Miss Maddie," he greeted warmly. "I have news. The court has frozen all of Oliver Hale's assets, and part of them will be reimbursed to North Star Holdings once verification is complete." Evelyn nodded calmly. "Thank you, Graham. I only want this matter closed, not every penny returned." Maddie looked at her mother, her voice faint. "You don't want to take back what I lost." Evelyn's gaze drifted toward the bright window. "No, Maddie. What's worth keeping isn't written in a bank ledger. It's in you." After the meeting, they walked together to the harbor. The salty wind tousled their hair as the vast blue water stretched endlessly before them. Mom Maddie asked quietly, "Do you ever regret not taking them to court?" Evelyn smiled gently. "If I had sought revenge, I would have become like them. Forgiveness is the only thing that truly sets you free." Maddie squeezed her mother's hand. "Mom, I want to do something for North Quay. Graham mentioned a project to help single women rent affordable housing. I want to be part of it." Evelyn stopped and looked at her daughter, eyes glowing with pride. "That's a wonderful idea. Daniel dreamed of something like that. If you're truly committed, I'll let you lead the project." Maddie's eyes widened in disbelief. "You mean it, Mom? You'd trust me with that?" "Yes," Evelyn said. "But remember, do it from your heart, not to redeem yourself." That afternoon, they returned home. Maddie opened her laptop and began drafting her first real proposal. On the screen appeared the title, The Second Chance Home. Evelyn stood behind her, watching with quiet emotion. "Your father would be proud of you," she whispered. Maddie smiled through tears. "If I can help someone avoid the mistakes I made, then everything that happened will have meant something." As night fell, Halifax glittered with lights reflected across the bay like strands of pearls. The two women shared dinner in their small kitchen, surrounded by the comforting sound of waves in the distance. Maddie hesitated for a moment, then said, "Mom, I want to work for real, not because of the Hart name. I want people to remember me for my effort, not my family." Evelyn's voice was soft but resolute. "If you can keep that promise, Maddie, I'll have nothing left to worry about." Later, they stepped out onto the porch. The sea was calm, the moon bright above. "Mom," Maddie asked, her tone hesitant, "the day Dad died, what did you feel?" Evelyn was quiet for a long time. "It felt like a piece of my heart had been taken away. But now, when I look at you, I know he never really left. He's in the wind, in the waves, and in everything we're building together." Maddie rested her head on her mother's shoulder, her voice trembling. "I just wish I could tell him that I finally understand what love truly means." Evelyn stroked her daughter's hair gently. "Then tell him. He's listening." Maddie lifted her eyes to the sky, tears glistening under the moonlight. "Dad, I'm sorry. I betrayed you and Mom, but I'm trying to make things right. I promise I'll live in a way that makes you proud." A soft wind swept across the porch, flickering the lantern light. Evelyn smiled and squeezed her daughter's hand. "He heard you, Maddie. He's still here." That night, Halifax was wrapped in peace. The steady rhythm of the waves echoed like a lullaby. Two women sat side by side, one who had been betrayed, one learning to redeem herself. They said nothing more, letting the sea speak for them. And as the moonlight stretched across the bay, Evelyn knew the storm had truly passed. What remained now was calm forgiveness and a love strong enough to heal everything that had once been broken. Morning in Halifax was veiled in a soft mist. Weak sunlight filtered through the kitchen window, shining on the counter where Evelyn Hart was making coffee. Maddie stepped out, her hair neatly tied an apron around her waist and a rare brightness on her face. "Mom, I'm making breakfast today," she said gently. "Eggs, toast, and even orange juice." Evelyn smiled faintly. "That's unusual. You haven't woken up this early since high school." Maddie chuckled, slightly embarrassed. "I have good news. A nonprofit organization sent me an email. They want to partner with North Key for the Second Chance Home project. Maybe Graham introduced us." Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "That's wonderful, but remember, a humanitarian project requires more than good intentions. It demands discipline and transparency." "I know," Maddie said softly. "This time I want to do it right. I don't want to just dream about it." That afternoon they went to North Key. The old high-rise was being repainted, its glass windows catching the golden sunlight. Maddie looked up, her eyes filled with emotion. "I used to think this place was gray and lifeless, but now it feels alive." Evelyn stood beside her, her voice gentle. "Hope is the one thing you can't buy. It only exists when you believe in yourself." As they walked through the hallway, Graham Langford appeared holding a folder. "Mrs. Hart, Miss Maddie, I bring good news. The city has approved the funding proposal for the project. Part of the budget will be allocated for the first phase." Maddie's eyes widened. "Really? That's amazing." "Thank you, Mr. Langford." Evelyn smiled. "See, perseverance pays off. But remember, when money and recognition arrive, that's when the real test begins." That evening, Maddie sat by the window writing detailed plans for the project. The warm light from the desk lamp reflected on her focused face. Evelyn walked over and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You're doing well, Maddie. Your father would be proud." Maddie smiled softly. I'm just trying to become the person you and Dad raised me to be. Evelyn looked at her daughter, her eyes distant with memory. When Daniel died, I thought everything ended. But now, seeing you like this, I know he never left. He lives on in you in every choice you make. Maddie held her mother's hand. I'll continue his dream not just to rebuild homes, but to rebuild trust. They sat together for a while, listening to the sound of the distant waves. Then Maddie whispered, Mom, are you ever afraid I'll make mistakes again? Evelyn shook her head gently. Mistakes are part of being human. I only fear when people stop getting up after they fall, but you already know how to stand. The next morning, the local paper carried a headline that made Maddie freeze North Key reborn under the hands of 2 generations of heart women. She rushed to show it to her mother. Mom, they wrote about us. Evelyn read the article, then set the paper on the table. News fades after a day. What matters is how you live for the years to come. I don't want people to remember you as Evelyn Hart's daughter, but as Maddie, the woman who gave others a chance. Tears glimmered in Maddie's eyes as she hugged her mother. I promise, Mom. That afternoon, the wind from the bay grew stronger. They stood together on the North Key balcony, watching the sun sink into the horizon. The sea glowed a fiery orange, its reflection shimmering on Evelyn's silver hair. Mom, Maddie said softly, if Dad were still here, he'd be so happy. Evelyn nodded, her eyes fixed on the horizon. Your father always believed that what's built with love can never truly be lost, and now you're proving him right. Maddie smiled, her gaze filled with new confidence. I think I finally found where I belong, Mom. Evelyn held her daughter's hand, her voice tender. As long as you keep that faith, I'll never have to worry again. The wind from the bay carried the scent of salt and the rhythm of the waves. Under the glowing orange sky, mother and daughter stood side by side, one who had once lost everything and one who had learned to begin again. And in that fiery twilight, Evelyn knew the storms of their lives had truly passed. What remained was peace and a love strong enough to rebuild everything they had lost, brick by brick, heartbeat by heartbeat, with courage and unconditional grace. A week after the article was published, North Key felt like an entirely different place. The once cold building now glowed with light every evening, its hallways filled with the fresh scent of paint. Maddie walked through the newly completed apartments, the air rich with the smell of wood and renewal, a scent of beginnings. On the ground floor, Evelyn Hart was working with Graham Langford, reviewing the budget and the list of women chosen for the program's first phase. Maddie entered, holding a stack of files. Mom, I met 2 applicants today, she said. Both are single mothers. Evelyn looked up, her gaze firm yet kind. Did you check everything carefully? Yes, Maddie replied. One works in retail, the other is a hotel cleaner. They both meet the requirements. Good, Evelyn said. But remember, we're not just giving them a place to live, we're helping them find their faith again. Maddie smiled, just like you did for me. Graham looked between them, a faint, wistful smile on his face. You 2 remind me of Daniel. He always believed that anyone could start over, if given the chance. Later that afternoon, when the workers had gone home, Maddie stayed on the 12th floor. The golden light of sunset spilled across the freshly painted walls. She stood by the window, gazing down at Halifax Bay glimmering in the distance. A year ago, she thought her life had ended. Now she was helping others begin theirs. The sound of footsteps echoed softly behind her. Evelyn appeared holding 2 cups of coffee. Tired a little. Maddie said, smiling faintly, but it's the kind of tired that makes me feel alive. Evelyn nodded. Daniel once said that when you live for others, you'll never feel empty. Maddie turned to her mother, her voice tender. Mom, if Dad were still here, do you think things would be different? Evelyn paused for a moment. Maybe different, but not necessarily better. Loss makes us stronger. If Daniel were still alive, I might never have learned to stand on my own, and you perhaps would never have changed." Maddie nodded slowly. "I used to think losing money was the worst thing, but losing trust, that's what truly hurts." Evelyn placed a gentle hand on her daughter's shoulder, "And yet you've earned it back mine and your own." As night fell, North Key shimmered with light. Downstairs, the laughter of workers echoed through the halls. A little girl ran past holding a red balloon. Maddie watched her go, tears glinting in her eyes. "Mom," she whispered, "for the first time, this place feels alive." Because for the first time, Evelyn said softly, "This place has a heart, and you brought it back." The next morning, the inauguration ceremony took place. Reporters, city officials, and local residents filled the hall. Maddie stood beside her mother as flashes from cameras lit up the stage. Evelyn was the first to speak, her voice calm but deeply moving. "North Key was once a symbol of loss," she said. "Today it stands for new beginnings. Everyone deserves a second chance." When she stepped back, Maddie took her place. Her voice trembled, but her words were steady. "A year ago, I lost everything: love, trust, and myself. But my mother, who stands beside me today, taught me that redemption doesn't begin with money. It begins with action. This project isn't just a building. It's a reminder that kindness can be rebuilt from the ruins." The room fell silent, then erupted into long applause. Evelyn looked at her daughter, pride shimmering in her eyes. Later that afternoon, after the event, they returned home and sat on the porch, listening to the waves crash against the rocks. Maddie spoke quietly. "Mom, that day, when I sold everything, did you ever think about giving up on me?" Evelyn stared out toward the horizon. "I did. I wanted to close the door and never look back. But then I remembered Daniel's words, 'Keep the door open because she'll come home.' And he was right. You did come home." Tears streamed down Maddie's face as she reached for her mother's hand. Evelyn held her close, her voice soft but sure. "No one is perfect, Maddie, but with faith we can rebuild everything." The wind from the bay swept across the porch, carrying the scent of salt and the gentle sound of the sea. That night, Halifax was unusually still. Evelyn looked up at the sky where stars shimmered above and reflected on the dark water below. She smiled, certain that Daniel was watching over them. In that quiet moment, two women sat side by side, one who had been betrayed and one who had once lost her way. They didn't need to speak. Their silence said enough. The past had closed behind them, and ahead lay a new path, one built on forgiveness, faith, and hope. A winter morning in Halifax lay beneath a soft mist. Pale sunlight glimmered across the bay. Maddie opened the 12th floor window of North Key and inhaled the cold air scented with salt and sea. Below, a few women were hanging blankets to dry while children ran in circles, their laughter ringing through the courtyard. The sight made her smile. The building that was once abandoned had become a home. Evelyn entered carrying 2 steaming cups of coffee. "Up earlier than me again," she teased. Maddie smiled. "I have an interview with a reporter. They want to write another piece about the project, but this time I'll talk about the women here, not about us." Evelyn nodded approvingly. "Good. A project only holds meaning when it belongs to the community, not to our names." They stepped out onto the balcony, the wind tugging at Evelyn's silver hair. Maddie looked at her mother and asked softly, "Do you still think about Dad?" Evelyn's gaze turned toward the horizon. "Every day. But memories aren't pain anymore. They're light that guides me forward." Maddie hesitated. "I want to start life skills classes for the women living here. They need opportunity, not just shelter." Evelyn smiled. You're beginning to understand what your father always said: when you help someone stand, you rebuild yourself too. That afternoon, Maddie met the reporter at a small cafe near the harbor. The young woman flipped open her notebook, her tone warm. "Miss Maddie, your story and Mrs. Hart's have inspired so many. Do you consider yourself lucky?" "Yes," Maddie replied. "But luck isn't a gift. It's what comes when you face your mistakes." "If you could go back, would you change anything?" the reporter asked. Maddie shook her head. "No. If I hadn't lost everything, I wouldn't know how to value what I have now." When evening came, Maddie returned to North Key. In the lobby, a few women were tidying up while children played around an old sofa. A little girl with curly hair ran up to her holding out a sheet of paper covered in crayon drawings of two people holding hands. "Miss Maddie, this is you and my mom." Maddie laughed and patted her head. "It's beautiful, thank you." She looked around the faces that had once been shadowed with despair, now shone with quiet hope. Emotion welled in her chest. That night, she and Evelyn had dinner at their small home by the bay. The warm lamplight softened their faces, filling the room with peace. Evelyn poured them each a little wine. "You're in the papers again today," she said, but this time they wrote about the women of North Key. "That's exactly what I wanted," Maddie replied. "I don't need praise. I just want the project to outlive me." Evelyn looked at her daughter, her eyes gentle yet full of pride. "You've gone farther than I ever imagined. Daniel must be smiling somewhere." Maddie fell quiet, then asked if Dad could see us. "What do you think he'd say?" Evelyn smiled. "He'd say that now we both understand happiness isn't having everything, it's sharing what we have." Maddie nodded slowly. "I remember the day he died. You didn't cry, but I knew you were in pain." Evelyn gave a faint smile. "Yes, but tears wouldn't have helped. I chose to turn grief into strength, just like you're doing now." After a long silence, Maddie said, "I want to start a scholarship fund for the children of the women here. It won't be much, but I'll begin with my own salary." Evelyn reached for her hand, her voice warm and steady. "That's how you repay life, not with the past, but with the future." Outside, the wind from the bay swept across the porch, carrying the scent of salt. Maddie stood and looked out at the sea. The moonlight shimmered on the water like a mirror. "Mom, I think Dad's out there watching us." Evelyn followed her gaze, smiling softly. "I think so too." They stood side by side in silence, one who had once been lost and one who had once waited in pain. Now both had found peace not in wealth or recognition, but in the meaning of living for others. The ocean breeze whispered through the porch, the sound of the waves, gentle and rhythmic like a message carried from afar. Evelyn closed her eyes and smiled, hearing Daniel's voice in the wind. "I'm proud of you both." She answered quietly, "I know, Daniel. We did it." Outside, the lights of Halifax glowed across the bay. On the 12th floor of North Key, a little girl taped her drawing to the wall, two women holding hands under the moon. And in that soft glow, the story of the Hart family continued, a living reminder that compassion can bring back everything once thought lost. Early morning in Halifax was wrapped in a soft white mist, the cold air pressing gently against the tall glass windows of North Key. From her 12th floor office, Evelyn Hart stood in quiet reflection, gazing at the calm gray bay below. The sound of distant gulls mingled with the hum of the city waking up. On her desk lay a stack of documents papers that marked the next chapter of the Second Chance Home project. Her pen had just touched the last signature, finalizing the plan to expand their mission. For a long moment, she listened to the faint laughter echoing from the lower floors. The building, once abandoned and silent, was now full of life. Women greeted each other in the halls, and children's voices floated upward like music. Evelyn's chest swelled with quiet pride. The office door opened and Maddie entered carrying a stack of folders. "Mom," she said softly, "I finished reviewing the new applicants. There are 12 women this round, and 2 of them are survivors of domestic abuse. I think we should prioritize them." Evelyn turned toward her, her expression calm but thoughtful. "Do it," she said. "Everyone who comes here must feel that they matter, that their story still has worth." Maddie hesitated, glancing down at the folders. "There's something else," she continued. "A nonprofit organization in Toronto reached out. They want to partner with us and replicate our model. They've invited me to present at their board meeting next month." Evelyn smiled faintly, warmth touching her voice. "You'll go, Maddie. It's time you stood on your own." Maddie looked uncertain. "Alone, I'm not sure I'm ready for that." Evelyn turned back to the window, the morning light catching the silver in her hair. "You don't need to be perfect," she said. "You just need to be honest. People don't believe in perfection, they believe in truth. Speak from that and you'll be fine." That afternoon, North Key held its first community gathering. Maddie arranged pastries and coffee while Evelyn set up chairs in the newly renovated lobby. The space was alive with chatter, laughter, and the faint aroma of freshly baked bread. Women who had once arrived in tears now smiled freely, their children running joyfully around them. A little boy approached Evelyn holding a paper rose in his tiny hand. "Here," he said shyly. "My mom says we have a home because of you." Evelyn crouched down to meet his eyes. "Thank you," she said gently. "But don't forget your mom is the brave one." When the event ended, the room slowly emptied. Maddie lingered behind, gazing at the plaque on the wall that read, "Second Chance Home." The setting sun filtered through the windows, bathing the words in warm, golden light. Evelyn joined her, placing a hand on her daughter's shoulder. "You've done more than I ever dreamed," she said quietly. Maddie smiled, her voice trembling. "No, Mom, you did everything. I just followed where you led." Evelyn shook her head. "No, sweetheart. I only kept the flame alive. You turned it into light." That night, the moon hung low above the bay, painting the water silver. On the balcony, Evelyn and Maddie sat together, wrapped in soft silence. The salty wind brushed against their faces. Maddie opened her notebook and looked down at her notes. "Mom," she said, "I need to talk about the future." Evelyn chuckled. "That sounds serious, tell me." Maddie took a deep breath. "If the Toronto project goes through, I'll need to live there for a while. I don't want to leave you, but if we want this to grow, I have to go." Evelyn remained quiet for a long moment, eyes fixed on the horizon. "You should go, Maddie. Love isn't about keeping someone close. It's about giving them space to soar." Maddie looked down. "I just don't want you to be alone." Evelyn smiled softly. "I'm not alone anymore. North Key is full of voices now. Every laugh that echoes through these halls reminds me we've built something lasting." After a moment, Maddie whispered, "I miss Dad." Evelyn's voice grew tender. "He's still here. Every time you help someone stand again, you're doing what he dreamed of." The waves rolled gently below, reflecting the moonlight. "Your father once wrote in his journal," Evelyn continued, "If one day I'm gone, let the light guide the 2 women I love most." Do you see it now, Maddie? That light is you. Maddie's eyes shimmered with tears. "I don't think I deserve to hear that." Evelyn reached over and held her hand. "You deserve it more than you know. You faced the darkness and found faith again. That's real courage, Maddie." A sudden breeze lifted the curtains, and Maddie rested her head on her mother's shoulder. "If Dad's watching," she whispered, "he must be proud." Evelyn smiled, eyes turned to the stars. "He is," she said. They sat there in peaceful silence, listening to the distant hum of the sea. In that quiet moment, it felt as if the years of pain had dissolved into something gentle and whole. Evelyn spoke softly, almost to herself. "We did it, Daniel. Our girl finally came home." And through the night, the lights of North Key glowed warm against the dark sky, not just from electricity, but from the hope and love two women had rebuilt and shared with the world. One spring morning, Halifax glowed beneath a clear sky. The chill was fading as the ocean breeze carried the scent of salt and blooming flowers around North Key. Evelyn Hart stood on the 12th floor balcony, looking out at the young trees planted in front of the building. Women were tidying the courtyard while children ran and laughed. Life had returned to a place that once knew only silence. Maddie stepped outside wearing a cream-colored coat, holding a train ticket in her hand. "Mom, my trip to Toronto is confirmed. I leave tomorrow morning." Evelyn turned and smiled calmly. "Are you ready?" Maddie nodded, though her eyes revealed a flicker of anxiety. "I'm both excited and scared. This new project is bigger than anything I've ever done. I'm afraid I'm not good enough." "No one begins with certainty," Evelyn replied. "You once lost everything and still found the strength to stand again. That's enough for me to believe you'll do well." Maddie tightened her grip on the ticket. "I don't want to leave you. North Key feels like home." Evelyn smiled softly. "Home is something you carry in your heart. Wherever you go, North Key will remain a part of you, just as your father is always a part of me." They stood in silence as the breeze swept through the balcony and the cries of seagulls echoed in the pale blue sky. Evelyn handed her a small envelope. "Your father wrote this before he passed. I've kept it until now, and I think this is the right time." Maddie unfolded it carefully. Inside was a single sheet of paper, her father's familiar handwriting. "When you read this, I hope you've found yourself again. Use your pain to create kindness. When you help someone stand, you will never fall again." Tears welled in Maddie's eyes. "I think he knew everything before it happened." Evelyn took her hand, her voice warm. "Your father always believed in you even when you were most lost. Now you only need to believe in yourself." That afternoon they walked along the bay. Gentle waves lapped the shore, the sunlight glinting across the water. Maddie looked back at North Key in the distance, its glass reflecting the golden light like a guiding lantern. "Mom, I remember the day I first came back here. The building felt cold and foreign. Now it feels like my heart's scarred but still beating strong." Evelyn smiled. "Scars don't make us weaker. They remind us that we've lived." That evening, the residents of North Key gathered to say goodbye to Maddie. They brought pastries, flowers, and heartfelt wishes. A little girl ran up and hugged her tightly. "Miss Maddie, I'll miss you. Promise you'll come back." Maddie knelt down, hugging the child. "I promise. And when you grow up, you'll help others too, won't you?" The little girl nodded, her eyes sparkling. When the farewell ended, only Evelyn and Maddie remained in the lobby. The Second Chance Home sign on the wall glowed softly under the lights. Maddie spoke quietly. "Mom, if I ever truly succeed, I want this building to bear Dad's name." Evelyn nodded, her eyes glistening. "The Daniel Hart Foundation. It sounds beautiful." That night, Maddie packed her suitcase. Among her clothes, she placed her father's letter and an old photo of the three of them by the sea. Evelyn helped her close the zipper, then paused. "You know, Daniel always said a woman's greatest strength is perseverance. I think you found yours." The next morning, sunlight filled the sky. Maddie hugged her mother tightly by the door. "I'll come back, Mom, but no matter where I go, I'll carry Halifax with me." Evelyn smiled through tears. "Go, my girl, let the world see your light." The taxi pulled away from North Key. Maddie glanced out the window. On the 12th floor balcony, Evelyn still stood there, small but unshakable in the morning light. When the car disappeared down the street, Evelyn turned back inside, walking through the hallways filled with the laughter of new residents. She stopped before Daniel's photograph hanging in her office and gently touched the glass frame. "Do you see Daniel? Our girl has gone on." Outside, the sunlight streamed through the window, bathing the family photo in gold. Evelyn sat at her desk and opened a new notebook titled The Light Project, a program to expand the North Key model to other cities. She wrote the first line: "When we give someone a chance, we also give them faith that the world can still be kind." Halifax bustled outside. The sound of the harbor bell echoed, signaling the departing train carrying Maddie and her new beginning. Evelyn looked up, inhaling the sea air, her heart light, as if she had just fulfilled a promise. Thank you for listening to the end of this story. Share your thoughts about the Hart family's journey. Where in the world are you listening from? Leave a comment below, and if you love heartfelt, real-life stories like this one, don't forget to follow for more inspiring tales to come.